Welcome back to another Destiny build video, this time for Hunters. The name of the video might give away what this build is about if you've had a similar idea yourself. The Super Spinny Ballerina Hunter, patent pending. The name needs some work, I'll be honest, sure, but in my head it needed to be descriptive, and that's exactly what it is. This build is actually really fun to watch and play. It's so brainless, just like the Warlock and Titan slide builds that I love. And it's pretty effective in seasonal content and some harder content too, which is the part that I love about it. You can take it anywhere and get results. There are a couple of bugs that are affecting the build at the moment, but they're honestly not life-changing, just some quality of life stuff that would make the build feel better that I'll explain in a minute. Now, thanks for supporting my channel by coming and watching a video or two. It's really cool seeing my channel grow. I just gave the channel a bit of a facelift with some better art to make it look and feel like a proper channel and not just a hobby anymore. I've also started on a plan to release a video every Sunday or Monday, depending on your time zone, that is going to be on content other than Destiny 2. So if you're interested in watching me and my friends mess around in a variety of games, go check them out if they look interesting to you. We're starting on Split Fiction, so if you do end up liking either those or a couple of my other videos, please consider subscribing as well, as it really helps me out and lets me know what you enjoy watching. Alrighty Hunters, it's your turn. I've played with Warlock enough this season now, it's time to switch it up. I had this build in my back pocket since the beginning of the episode. The buffs that some of the Hunter aspects received, along with the buff that a certain pair of exotic boots received, gave me the idea to try something really dumb. Now that the aspect Ascension also works with other Hunter aspects that activate on class ability, we can combine it for some pretty funny results. For this build specifically, I'm using Ascension. While airborne, use your class ability to summon an arc staff, launching yourself upward and creating a burst of energy around you that amplifies allies and jolts enemies. This aspect is the core of the build, since the rework allows it to trigger other Hunter aspects that rely on the dodge to work. Combine this with Threaded Spectre, and this is where the magic will happen. Threaded Spectre leaves behind a clone of your Hunter that attracts aggro from nearby enemies, causing them to shoot the Strand clone instead of you. This is especially useful in hard content, as the less aggressive enemies are to shooting you, the more likely you are to survive. For the Fragments, I suggest the following setup. Facet of Purpose, picking up an Orb of Power, grants an elemental buff based on the damage type of your equipped super. This is one of my go-to fragments for any build. If you're rocking Golden Gun, then you'll gain Restoration, or if you run Storm's Edge, you will gain Bolt Charge, and with one stack of Bolt Charge, you are effectively able to get off a lightning strike just by dealing damage. Facet of Purpose has a lot of versatility, and honestly, you can pick whatever super that you want to run with this fragment. The next fragment that I suggest is Facet of Protection. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage, and while transcendent, the effect is increased. This is just free damage resistance. If the enemy gets close enough that they are a problem, then Facet of Protection will kick in and it will save you. It's also very easy to get Transcendence in this build and take advantage of the improved effect. The third fragment I suggest is Facet of Courage. Your light abilities deal increased damage to targets afflicted with darkness debuffs. If you are running Golden Gun, then all you need to do is apply Sever or Slow to a target and your super will deal increased damage. This bonus damage can be very useful in DPS phases, hence why I recommend it. It helps scale the build and makes it much more viable in things like raids and dungeons. The fourth fragment is Facet of Solitude. Landing rapid precision hits emits a severing blast from the target, while Transcendent, the severing blast is bigger. I suggest rocking this fragment because it lets us sever bulkier targets just for landing precision hits. When targets are severed, their damage output is reduced, which will help with our survivability, as well as giving us a lot of synergy with the artifact this season. I personally think that Facet of Solitude is really underrated, as it can give us access to Strand verbs without actually having to have any Strand abilities. A cool little feature that I noticed while playing with the build is that after landing enough precision hits with a weapon, the next bullet will apply Sever. So if you are able to reach the threshold as Khvostov starts to ricochet, you can apply Sever to targets that you weren't even shooting. The second last fragment that I suggest is Facet of Grace. Defeating targets with kinetic weapons grants you bonus Transcendence energy, and defeating targets with your super grants you and nearby allies bonus Transcendence energy. Thanks to our weapon of choice being kinetic, we benefit from this fragment quite a lot. Combined with our abilities, it will be really easy to generate Transcendence energy, allowing for even greater ability spam. The final fragment for this build is Facet of Hope. while you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly. Even though we have our entire build around getting back our class ability, it doesn't hurt to have an alternative way to improve our options. Thanks to Ascension, when you perform an air dodge, you gain both Amplified and Radiant, which if I'm remembering correctly, doubly boosts our class ability regeneration by up to 60%, so use the dodge to gain a dodge. For your abilities, you're going to want things that help generate Transcendence energy, especially the energy that you don't generate a lot of. Since Ascension makes generating light Transcendence really easy, I recommend focusing on darkness-based abilities. For your melee, I personally like Threaded Spike. The Threaded Spike has a lot of mechanics that make it a good choice. It tracks aggressively between multiple enemies before returning to the player. If you catch the melee when it travels back to you, you gain additional melee energy, which helps with the repeated use of the ability. It also applies Sever to each enemy that it hits, lowering their damage output and exhausting them. The artifact this season has a few good options that synergize with Sever, which I will get to in a bit. For your grenade, I think either Grapple or Duskfield are good options. I like Grapple in easier content, especially if you manage to grapple a Tangle for infinite grapple melees. Alternatively, I think Duskfield is a good ability for dealing with Overload champions and Unstoppables in things like Master Nightfalls and GMs, while generating a decent chunk of Darkness Transcendence per use. So pick whichever grenade works best for you. For your class ability, I'm going to recommend the Radiant Dodge. Because this build revolves around using your dodge ability near or far from the enemy, the ability to give yourself almost 100% Radiant uptime without using a fragment is going to feel awesome. For your choice of super, that all depends on what kind of content you're doing and what you need. The build doesn't revolve around any particular type of super, so I recommend either Golden Gun, Storm's Edge, or Tether. Golden Gun as an option for DPS if you're in a dungeon or raid. Storm's Edge is a good in-between for ad clear and DPS, and it's also a good option to give you bolt charge on orb pickup from Facet of Purpose. And then Tether is a good option for even greater crowd control or as a debuff. Moving on to your loadout and weapons, the build will revolve around the use of any primary weapon, so I recommend using Khvostov. Since Khvostov is an exotic primary, as far as I remember, it should receive a 40% damage bonus versus red bar enemies, compared to other primary weapons. For those that aren't super familiar with Khvostov, it's an auto rifle that released with the final shape, and the exoticness of this gun is that bullets will ricochet between targets. Picking up an orb of power improves this effect. Khvostov can easily secure multi-kills as it bounces between crowds of adds and often eliminates the weaker targets that would have otherwise been guarded by bulkier targets. Khvostov also generates both Transcendence and super energy like crazy. Since it's a kinetic weapon that does multiple ticks of damage, it is able to do this very easily. And Khvostov excels pretty much anywhere in the game, in all levels of content. From strikes to raids and dungeons, Khvostov is absolutely insane. For your energy weapon, I suggest VS Velocity Baton from the Vesper Host dungeon. The reason is because it can roll with attrition orbs, which is the perfect combination when paired with Khvostov. Velocity Baton will generate tons of Transcendence energy if you need it, along with the orbs of power which you can then take advantage of with Khvostov by either collecting them or using shoot to loot. The ability to generate orbs of power without getting a kill will help Khvostov, especially in more difficult content. For your heavy weapon, the slot is honestly open to whatever you need. If you require champion coverage, then run something that works from the artifact like an LMG or a linear. If you're using an eager-edged sword, run that. For this build, I'm going to suggest that you use an LMG, because if you have the right setup, they can really put out some decent damage this season. The newly refreshed corrective measure from Vault of Glass is my top option. Demoralize and destabilizing rounds scale really well into more difficult content, giving you volatile rounds that can even benefit Velocity Baton and boost the damage. If getting your hands on a raid weapon is too difficult though, then I suggest grinding for a Hammerhead from Onslaught, as it can substitute for corrective measure since it can roll with destabilizing rounds. The exotic armor piece that the build revolves around is Radiant Dance Machines. These exotic pantaloons got a nice little buff or rework this season, and then a nerf, but it's still really good. Primary weapon kills give dodge energy and can give you multiple extra charges on top of that. The ability to get multiple dodges opens up a massive opportunity to spam your class ability, which the build is entirely built around. Radiant Dance Machines actually gives you dodge charges based on the number and the tier of the enemy that you killed. You get 1 full dodge charge for every 3 red bars that you kill, or you get 1 dodge charge for every major or higher enemy that you manage to kill. So any yellow bar or orange bar enemy will always give you 1 dodge charge, it doesn't matter. It's also important to note that the kill counter doesn't roll over. If you kill 2 red bars, then a yellow bar, then another red bar, you will only gain 1 extra dodge charge, and credit for 1 red bar to your next dodge. For your armor stats and mods, as always, the higher your resilience, the better, and in this case, followed by as much strength as possible. Since we won't be utilizing the dodge that grants us melee energy, so increased strength will help with that. The third stat that you can dump into is discipline. Starting at the helmet, you'll want at least 1 kinetic siphon, and if you're using corrective measure, then 1 void siphon as well. This will benefit both velocity baton and corrective measure, so you might want to run it even if you're not running corrective measure. Onto the gauntlets, a kinetic reloader will make Khvostov feel much smoother, and I suggest impact induction. Since you will have your melee more often than your grenade thanks to Threaded Spike having an automatic ability regen, you will find it more useful to use this instead of the other options. On your chest piece, it's my opinion that you should be running resists unless you really want to use reserves, so pick whatever is appropriate for the activity that you're doing. On your boots, I think running at least 1 recuperation is a good option, as you will generate and pick up a lot of orbs with this build, so taking advantage of this and receiving some healing will let you play much more aggressively. I would also suggest a void holster mod to auto reload your heavy weapon over time. The last mod on the boots can be whatever you feel you need. I like scavenger mods, but you could swap this for better already for additional healing, or absolution for additional ability regen. Pick the mod that feels better when you use it, and experiment with the other options as well to figure out what you like and what you don't like. On the cloak, we have a couple of good options to choose from for a class ability based build, and you might end up swapping them out for some of the other options when you give the build a try for yourself. First, I recommend Reaper, where after using your class ability, the next weapon final blow will generate an orb of power. Something important to note about this mod in conjunction with Ascension is that it doesn't activate when you use Ascension, which is one of the few bugs still lingering with this aspect. If you dodge normally, then Reaper will trigger, but Ascension doesn't seem to count as a class ability, just a dodge, or the other way around. It's weird, so just know that you have to do the Radiant dodge to get Reaper to work. My second suggestion, and with the same issue as Reaper, is Powerful Attraction. This mod is great for picking up loose orbs just lying around, or if you're in Gambit and want to grab all of the motes quickly. This is a great mod for that, but it doesn't work when you use Ascension, and I don't know if this is going to be fixed anytime soon. The last mod that I suggest is Bomber, and you can run whatever you want really, you don't have to run Bomber. Just like the last 2 mods, this doesn't work with Ascension either, only with the actual dodge will you get grenade energy. So just remember, if you want to activate any of the mods on your class item, you will need to do a regular dodge. Bomber is a nice little cherry on top, and I would normally swap that for a special finisher if I need to be able to store armor charges for a loadout swap at DPS. Now over to the artifact. The first 3 options are always anti-champions. Pick whatever works with your build. If you're running an LMG, you can pick LMG or any of the other options. In the second column, I suggest Volatile Marksman, as rapid kills with either your special or your heavy will give volatile rounds to both of them. If you have Tome of Want active, you will also get the boost, which can come in handy in harder content when you are struggling to get your class ability through primary weapon kills. The next mod in the second column that I recommend is Legend Incarnate, as this will increase the damage of corrective measure. Extra damage and overcharge just for having the mod equipped is free. I think you should also pick Vile Weave. If there are no other mods in the artifact between columns 2, 3, and 4, then I recommend Vile Weave. Since we're rocking a few options to apply a Strand debuff to targets, it should be pretty easy to generate a Tangle, and with this mod they become more useful and versatile, especially in harder content. In column 3, pick Dielectric, as Ascension jolts targets around you. When you defeat them, it will grant you a stack of Bolt Charge, which you can increase to times 10 and release a Bolt of Lightning. This season, Bolt Charge is absolutely insane, so why not enjoy it even while on a hunter? For the next mod, go with Elemental Siphon. Since we're using a kinetic weapon, this mod plays right into the build, regardless of the super that you pick. Also, depending on your playstyle, you can pick the boost for either of these two artifact mods. Just try both out and see which benefits you the most. Moving on to column 4, Maligned Harvest will work in conjunction with Volatile Marksman to apply Weaken, which will be more useful in harder content. And Flashover will work well with Dielectric when you gain Bolt Charge to increase their effectiveness in harder content like GMs. In the final column, one of the two options that I pick is Limit Break, which will boost the damage of your Golden Gun super since you have Radiant on demand whenever you use your class ability. And the last artifact mod for the build is To Shreds. Since it's going to be very easy to sever targets, especially in things like GMs, thanks to our melee or Facet of Solitude, when we defeat those targets, we'll gain damage resistance thanks to Woven Mail, which is extremely noticeable in GMs, and you can see it in this clip. I get Woven Mail all of the time. Almost every second enemy that I kill is severed, and there is no cooldown on this artifact mod. The little Strand hotspots spawn all over the place. Now, with all of the class setup and prep work done, let me explain the gameplay loop. At face value, it seems pretty simple. Use Ascension and kill with Khvostov. And you're not wrong, but there are a few tricks you can use and some choices you need to be aware of to get the most out of this build. To start with, your focus should be on making some orbs. Khvostov needs orbs to get rolling, so leading with your special or heavy will make them much sooner than Khvostov would. Next, you need to assess whether going aerial for even a moment will get you killed or not. In a GM, if there are a bunch of snipers locked onto you, jumping up into the air is going to result in your immediate account deletion, so just don't do it. A regular dodge to create a clone works just fine, especially if all you need to do is break aggro. Also, you keep a ton of momentum when you aerial dodge, so be careful it doesn't carry you over the edge of the map either. My point is that using Ascension is not always the best option, and a regular dodge is more appropriate. With some enemies, if you stand too close to your clone, they stay aggroed onto you, or they will hit you with splash damage, so in most cases, drop your clone and create some space. Alternatively, a neat little trick that I found you can do is aerial dodge to drop a clone mid-air and then stand on top of this clone. This refreshes your jump count, so you could theoretically use this to scale a building or something similar. You can also use this to get a better view of the ads and the general battlefield, but I don't recommend this strat in harder content or if there is a boss staring directly at you, even in a strike. Now, if you're lacking any stacks of Bolt Charge, then make sure to use Ascension sooner in a fight if it's appropriate, as once you have a single stack, any damage you deal will further increase your stacks and ultimately lead to a lightning strike. Now, like all of my other videos, here are the drawbacks that I encountered. Sometimes the ads would not immediately aggro the clone and would continue to shoot me or chase me, and in some cases, they wouldn't aggro my clone at all, which was kind of annoying since you need to constantly be aware that making a clone doesn't disengage you from the fight. There will always be something that can and will take a shot at you because the clone is out of the aggro range, but you aren't. The second drawback is that since the whole exotic and build basically revolves around an exotic primary weapon, if you are in an activity or an encounter where you can't lock down regular multi-kills with your primary, then the build will start to rapidly fall off in effectiveness. Now, this could be due to either ad density being low, your teammates were getting kill credit, or the ads themselves are very tanky. Whatever the case, if you can't secure the kills, then the build doesn't really work and you have to fall back on the rest of your kit. Thankfully, the LMG and Area Denial GL put out some good work in cases when your primary doesn't. The third issue, as I see it, is that the build locks your exotic to the kinetic slot, which is a small issue, but it means you can't run things like Queensbreaker or Tractor Cannon or any other exotic weapon for DPS or other means, except an exotic primary weapon in the kinetic slot. This is less of an issue than the other two, but it's still important to note the restrictions that this build has on your loadout and strategy. As a side note, in Onslaught the Strand clones are actually targeted by the turrets, and it holds the turret's attention for quite a while, which is a bit of a bummer because I figured that this build would probably be a bit of fun in a horde mode style game, but it is what it is. And that's about it. I don't think this is a build you're going to take into a GM and just solo it instantly, but I do think that it has potential for some crazy moments. But it's not a one-stop shop build for solo content. I do think that it is going to be very viable in raids and dungeons, along with things like the Nether and Court of Blades, thanks to the Jolt for ad clear, Radiant for damage boost, and Threaded Spectre for survivability. Anyway, give the build a try yourself and see how fun it is. If you change up anything and think you've improved the build, let me know what you've changed so that I can give it a try as well. If you'd like another Hunter build, or you want to see a build for the other classes, let me know in the comments. I've been tinkering with a Strand Titan build lately, but haven't found a balance that I'm happy with yet. Anyway, that's all from me. Thanks for making it to the end of the video and have a great day.